Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Building and Enhancing Intermediary Projects. I do want to quickly say that the target audience for this session, for whom this webinar is designed, is Intermediary VISTA project directors who are responsible for managing an entire AmeriCorps Intermediary VISTA project, and specifically those who are in their first 6 to 12 months of their VISTA project. But of course, regardless of your role within your AmeriCorps VISTA project, we're glad to have you today. My name is Eric Powell, and I'm a training specialist with the VISTA program at AmeriCorps headquarters in Washington, D.C. I previously served as an AmeriCorps member with the VISTA program in 2006 with Rhode Island Campus Compact, and then as an AmeriCorps leader in 2008 with Illinois Campus Compact. During today's session, I'll be your host and the main presenter. I'm delighted to be joined today by Kim Lingert, our guest speaker. Kim's previous careers of ministry and law consisted of developing community-based congregations for an international denomination and developing a statewide law firm. Currently, as the program manager for Ending Hunger Corps, she has combined the skills attained thus far with her passion for ending hunger in our lifetime. When working, or not, she enjoys island life with her family in Down East Maine. Kim, thank you so much for joining us and being with us today.
Thank you, Eric. I'm really pleased to be with you today as we focus on helping the newer intermediary project directors consider their first action steps and where to begin planning for managing their VISTA projects.
Well, Kim, I'd say let's get going, as I know that there's a lot of important points, especially 3 specifically, that we want to convey about intermediary VISTA projects. So first, Kim and I are going to define what an intermediary is in the context of a VISTA project. Next, we're going to identify 3 different components necessary for developing an intermediary project. And we're going to conclude by exploring communication strategies that intermediaries can use and actions to take in this work. At the end of today's session, we'll answer questions that you may have. When beginning any new endeavor, including starting an intermediary VISTA project, you need a foundation from which you can build and grow. Even though circumstances, roles, and actions will change, the foundation remains strong, and we must begin with a foundational question: what is an intermediary? Well, intermediary projects are not all the same. However, they do all share some similarities. In the VISTA program, an intermediary is the main organization that has the legal agreement, which is called the Memorandum of Agreement, with AmeriCorps to operate the VISTA project. The intermediary is responsible for all aspects of managing the overall VISTA project. It oversees multiple sites, which are different legal entities and nonprofit organizations that report up to the intermediary. And the intermediary has an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with the sites to make sure that they understand the rules. Intermediaries also may be involved in other critical project activities, such as marketing and promoting service opportunities, recruiting and orienting members, conducting the members' on-site orientation and training, etc. But the intermediary must work with the sites to determine if the responsibility of these other activities is with the intermediary, the sites, or both. Kim, I do want to ask you, from your experience, is this what comes to mind for you when you think about what an intermediary is?
Essentially, Eric, yes, it is. An intermediary is the link between AmeriCorps and the sites that do the work for the VISTA project. So if we imagine an old wagon wheel, the axle is AmeriCorps, the hub is the intermediary, which connects to the axle and to the various project sites or wheel spokes, and the outer rim represents the VISTA members. You can then imagine the road being the member experiences that we travel on toward the overall project goal. Because we are a unit, we all need to work together and at a speed that works for all, because one wheel going faster just puts the entire wagon into a ditch. Therefore, we need to emphasize that we, even though doing different things at different sites, are a team heading toward the same goal, each with unique skills and resources.
Kim, that is a fantastic analogy to really help visualize the relationships and connections. Analogies and parallels like this are so valuable when you are first developing an intermediary project, because there are so many pieces and parts to consider. Thinking about what Kim said, just some of the pieces include sites, members, the member experience, and more. And we can add a plethora of additional components to that list, but right now we're going to focus on just 3 specific components of intermediary project development. In developing successful intermediary projects, the 3 components we'll consider specifically relating to sites are recruitment, things to consider when searching for and selecting your sites. Orientation, things to include when introducing sites to AmeriCorps, the VISTA program, your specific VISTA project, etc. Communication, things to incorporate when collaborating and sharing information with sites early on and consistently. For your VISTA project to operate as an intermediary, you need service sites, which help realize the project goals. It's probably not at all surprising, then, that there is a large level of importance attached to the recruiting and selecting the right sites for your project. Your sites need to align themselves with the intermediary's project goals. They need to know the plan for the project, and they need to have a desire to be part of the VISTA project and its success. It's absolutely vital that your sites know what you, the intermediary, expect of them and you require of them. In many ways, recruiting sites is just like hiring staff. You want it to be a good partnership, and you want the sites to understand that they need to continue to be a site. A good practice is to develop structure for the project, recruit the sites, and then share that project structure with the sites when you orient them, because you're letting them be part of the continued project development and evolution. You will also need to have your sites review and sign a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU, so that your sites know and agree to various policies and guidelines. Remember, the intermediary signs a legal Memorandum of Agreement with AmeriCorps to have the VISTA project, and your sites sign a Memorandum of Understanding with you, the intermediary. A quick note, if you do have a Memorandum of Understanding blank example or a template that you would like to share with other intermediaries, you can go to the VISTA campus and navigate to VISTA Connect, where you can share resources such as this on the Resource Exchange section. And lastly, your sites must identify and appoint a direct supervisor for each member. We're not going to go into that in depth in this webinar, but I do want to mention that it is possible for one person to be the supervisor of multiple members. But you, the intermediary, need to work with your sites to make sure that each member has a direct supervisor and that they know who that person is.
Our orientation begins with the first conversations to help us form the site application, service opportunity listing, and VISTA assignment description. As soon as a site becomes active, they are invited to our site supervisor meetings each quarter. And in these meetings, we discuss what's happening at their site, collaboration opportunities with other sites that are active, and we provide program training. Once a member is selected, we meet with the supervisor to review orientation PowerPoints that include a review of our purpose, current AmeriCorps and program policies, and training on the software that tracks our members, houses resources, and collects data. For those supervisors who have prior AmeriCorps experience, the orientation is presented in a "how did you do it?" Well, this is what we've developed, back and forth style, to allow for the incorporation of their experiences. But for consistency and clarity, the information reviewed is the same.
Thank you, Kim. In your situation, it really sounds like your project enables supervisors with experience to impart some of that wisdom on newer supervisors, which probably helps them feel valued and appreciated, and really helps the newer supervisors feel connected to prior knowledge. Your example also highlights the critical component in any relationship: communication. Clear, consistent, and effective communication between the intermediary and its sites can build, strengthen, and sustain relationships. Communication is an exchange of information, ideas, or even a glance conveying excitement or confusion. But it's also an exchange of considerations and points to ponder. At the start of your new intermediary project, some important questions to consider are: what is your project's purpose and what goals is it trying to achieve? How is the project structured, and how can you articulate that structure to project staff and sites? What tasks and activities will your VISTA members perform, and how do those activities add up to the project objective and goals? What is the connection between the project and the community being served, and how can you help all project staff and stakeholders embrace and work to strengthen it? So let's take a look at a few other considerations. Where are your sites geographically located? How might their location impact your communication with them? Let me give you an example. If your sites are split across time zones, which is probably the case of many of you, you need to factor that in when scheduling meetings or phone calls. If your sites are split across the state or the country, you need to plan for traveling to the different sites and consider working hours as well as how much you actually want and need to communicate with them. I'm going to pause here since we're talking about communication with sites and ask you a question. In your role of managing the intermediary project, how often should you communicate with your sites? Please note that this question is not asking how often do you currently communicate with your sites, but how often you feel that you should to structure your communication. So we're going to ask you to enter your answer in the chat as we continue talking about communication. The answers will likely vary from project to project, either based on relationships that you already have with your sites or how you would like to structure your new project. But I'll offer a suggestion here as we see comments coming in. Especially for VISTA projects that are less than a year into their work, I recommend that you communicate to your sites at least once a month. And I see a lot of comments in the chat, either saying monthly or biweekly, which those are great. I definitely would not recommend any longer than that. And this is because you are still developing relationships with your sites, and you're really wanting to set up expectations of reciprocal communication. Also, from my experience with people's schedules and just the mindset around change in quantity, it's probably easier and much less stressful to decrease the frequency of communication than increase it later on. So for example, people that mentioned maybe you start off biweekly, probably easier to start off biweekly, and then later you can move to monthly if you need to. If you start off monthly and then try to go biweekly, weekly, or even every day, it gets a little bit more challenging. But I will say that you must determine the best frequency with your sites in terms of how often you as the intermediary should communicate with them and how often you want your sites to communicate with you. As the past few slides hinted, one of the components we recommend is establishing a communication strategy for your sites. With busy schedules and lots to do, I'm guessing that you probably don't want your sites overwhelming you by contacting you every single day or multiple times a day, but maybe, and if that's the case, that's totally fine as long as it works for you. But I also want to mention that perhaps you find it helpful that your sites regularly check in with you monthly, such as the last day of each month or setting up a schedule, making sure that they're updating you on member and site progress, challenges, areas needing support, and information for reports. You can take that information and then compile it for your project's reports, as well as for anything that AmeriCorps asks of you. Or maybe you want a weekly bulleted summary from your sites. Take a minute to reflect on these considerations, not just from your perspective, but in terms of what is best for your project to have the information and maintain the communication it needs to thrive. What is the content in your communication with site supervisors? If you're only communicating information, such as performing a simple transaction, it may end up being a one-sided relationship in which the site supervisor does not feel included in the process. So think about how you can ask for their input, their ideas, their insight on things like meeting agendas, possible policies and procedures that impact them, and so many other items. This really invites them to be a participatory entity and provides a stronger foundation for a mutual relationship. How do you instill motivation, inspiration, and a sense of community in your site supervisors? Well, I'll be honest, this is not a trick question, as our slide title shows. An important early consideration of your communication structure is how you will motivate, inspire, and build a community amongst your sites and your site supervisors. While internal motivation led by the sites themselves is essential, you can help enhance and sustain their motivation by using your knowledge about each supervisor and their site to explain how their mission, their interests, and their plans are important and connected to the larger VISTA project, and by tapping into their own personal and professional interests to really align them with the work. You do this through engaging with each supervisor and participating in active listening as you each get to know each other. One of the great things, and one of the reasons why I'm so glad to have Kim on this webinar, is she works to do this at her VISTA project by really focusing on the connection between program structure, communication, and motivation. Kim, I'm going to turn to you to ask you to provide us some more details about this aspect.
Absolutely, Eric. I'm happy to. As communication is foundational to our program, so is facilitating collaboration between our sites and our members. To this end, communication both ways is critical to our relationship and success in the program. Program staff need to be able to speak clearly, but to do so, they must first be open to listening. We are all in this to reach our program goal, and some of the important things we think about are we clear about our program goals? Is our staff? As we listen to our sites, are we hearing that our goals are in sync? Getting these answers takes some time, but it pays off in the long run. A third consideration is, are our program policies accessible to all involved? This may be simply ensuring that others know where they are, or digitalizing the information for sites farther away. Whatever the method, the end result should be a written statement of your purpose, AmeriCorps and your program's policies, and ensuring any necessary forms are in a central location that is accessible to members and supervisors. By accessible, I mean that they know how to access it, have the necessary credentials, such as a badge or password, and privileges to access the material. Lastly, we consider if our processes benefit our program, members, and sites. A VISTA program is not about cheap labor. It is about building capacity to change the world, one community at a time. So our program regularly reviews benefits with supervisors, members, and staff, and we strive to reinforce it through our comments and behavior. An example that immediately comes to my mind is our asking in our timesheets for challenges and joys in our biweekly reports that we collect.
Thank you so much, Kim. Those questions or considerations that you shared around project goals, accessible policies, and even beneficial policies are such wonderful examples of things to include in a communication structure. And from that, I'm going to mention a couple of things. First, any strategy that you develop around communication will be much stronger if it encompasses 360-degree learning, everyone learning from each other. The sharing of information, the in-person or virtual meetings, and even the stories captured, which are so powerful, the asking of questions, all of this enhances the ability of the intermediary and the site supervisors to learn what each other is doing, to attain new knowledge about the work, and to improve their efforts in accomplishing the project goal. Second, build trust by being transparent and organized with communication. Can't say that enough. For example, after a meeting with a site and cleaning up your meeting notes, consider sharing with them and with the site supervisors the information. Ask them to review and comment on the details, as well as to insert any follow-up questions that they have for you. In addition to that, put the information into practice by reminding yourself and the site supervisor of next steps and action items necessary to act on after the meeting takeaways. This approach really builds trust and collaboration while ensuring that everyone is on the same page. And we alluded to it before, but one of the best ways to learn is by asking questions. Not simply asking for asking's sake, but to seek answers and knowledge, to sometimes challenge the status quo, and to clarify information. As you communicate with site supervisors, don't be afraid to ask hard questions when necessary. You may be surprised at how that can motivate someone to continue to do good work and strive for better collaboration. Here's an example. If you need a supervisor to reflect on their work or their members' work, maybe you ask them an open-ended question such as, What do you think that you could do better, or how do you think you can improve in your work? Once they respond, you could follow up by asking them, what would you need to make that happen? By asking questions like this, you're motivating them and getting them to think about how they may be able to take action on their own through tangible tools and processes, of course, with support from you, the intermediary, but ultimately working towards achieving the program goal. When you would like feedback, intentionally ask your site supervisors a more broad question, such as, how can I better support you? That way they can answer the question in any way that they desire. And this lets the supervisors see that you actually value their feedback and you want to support them, which can go a long way towards motivating them to help you build and enhance the intermediary project. I want to provide another communication tool that can really get you the information that you need and demonstrate your desire for communication and collaboration, and that is surveys. You may choose to send a survey to your site supervisors about specific topics at various points in your project. We could do an all-day session on just creating effective surveys, which I would love to do. But for the sake of time in the context of this webinar, I'll just mention that you need to carefully think about what questions you are asking, how the questions are worded, why you're asking certain questions, what information you're actually seeking, and if you're looking for qualitative or quantitative or both types of data. I also encourage you to think about, what do you plan to do with the data you collect? What action steps will you take? And how do you plan to implement some changes as a result? Again, be transparent about what results you intend to share with the sites and how you intend to use the information to build and enhance the relationship with your sites through effective communication.
Tools or practices that strengthen your working relations really stand out to me, Eric. For us, for me, the key to our work is the relationship between the program staff and the site staff. While our program team responsibilities are interrelated, we each have an individual focus of either sites, recruitment, or member care. My position works primarily with the sites, building relationships with the supervisors and their programs. While we have application forms in our process, site representatives share their current processes and goals with me through conversations, beginning with our discussion of how a VISTA member would build capacity. This builds a communication stream that remains consistent throughout the service year. After selection and before the VMO, we schedule an onboarding with the supervisor, which reviews AmeriCorps and program procedures, performance goals, reporting software, and meeting requirements. The communication is kept consistent with quarterly meetings at which sites share, collaborate, and additional program training is presented. This is added on to by our VISTA members having a monthly cohort meeting via Teams, in addition to individual check-ins and also 3 to 4 professional development trainings for both members and site staff per year.
Wow, Kim, your program definitely has many communication tools and processes in place that build relationships with sites and really help facilitate project success. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because our conversation really highlighted ways to foster relationship building with the sites through requesting feedback, asking questions, and motivating them in different ways. Let's continue this discussion by hearing your perspective. We're going to place a link in the chat for you now to select. And the question that we're asking is, how do you build relationships with your sites? Please be as specific as possible, elaborating on the mode or methods you use, how frequently you use them, and if that approach varies across circumstances. So go ahead and click on the link in the chat now for you to select so that we can see how everyone responds. You'll select the mural link to access a collaborative whiteboard. After you select the link, you'll be presented with a welcome window. At that point, you want to select View as Visitor option. Then on the next screen, you may enter your name, or you can select View as Visitor again. And then once you're in the mural, although Mural provides many options for adding your input, we're going to ask you to post your definition using a sticky note, because it's really easy to use and to read. To post your note, we'll ask you to double click in the white space. Do not double click in the blue banner, because it won't work. Make sure you double click in the white space to post your sticky note. And please do be a good collaborator and try not to move or delete someone else's post. On your screen, you can also pan and adjust the screen, as well as zoom out for more space. We'll be displaying the mural on the screen so you can see it, and it'll be really exciting as the screen gets busy and lots of comments come in. So I'll later try to compile the comments and make them available for you after the webinar. So we'll give you a little bit more time to post one or more sticky notes in the mural. And again, double click in the white space to add your sticky note, and we'll review a few in just a moment. Wow, this is looking great. Kim, I'll turn to you first. It looks like I'm seeing quite a few comments coming in and things that may tie in with things that you've already mentioned. Do you have any thoughts or responses based on what you're seeing so far?
I do. It's really nice to see site visits that don't have an agenda, but just so that the site supervisors and the VISTAs can show off what they're doing is really a neat idea. You know, not having that agenda is a big deal for folks. Some truly great ideas. What do you see?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of comments relating to clear, consistent communication, a lot of frequent conversations monthly, whether it's via a member newsletter, inviting them to events that our organization is doing, people using Slack for providing messages. It seems, Kim, like the vast majority relates to communication, but there's a few others that talk about including others in your work and the outcome so that they know what the overall trajectory of the VISTA project is going to do. Making sure having site supervisors take trainings on the VISTA campus so they can learn and absorb more information so they're successful in their role, but they can also be really good a partner with the intermediary. And then the other one I see is creating a specific time and space to share updates, concerns, and accomplishments. When I see that one, it makes me think not just your monthly or bi-weekly meetings, but having a special time that if you really want to reflect on what's going on, and whether it's a 30-minute chat or once a quarter, to have a separate time designated just for that. These comments are great. I invite you to keep these coming in. This will be available after the webinar as well. So as you go throughout the webinar and you think about additional ways to build relationships with your sites, please continue adding to the mural. We really want to thank you for your participation. It really is fantastic seeing these different approaches and the common threads. And while you work on that, we're next going to get back into gear with a deeper discussion around communication. Since communication is so vital in your effort to build and enhance your intermediary project with your sites, we're keeping it going, but now we're going to move from early in the project's considerations to site-specific communication tips focused on setting expectations. When you communicate with your sites in the early months of your VISTA project, it's helpful to frame your thinking as you communicate and share the expectations that you and AmeriCorps have of your sites. When you begin developing your expectations, first consider what structure makes the best sense for your project, not necessarily you as an individual, although that helps to combine both. While each project director has their own opinion and the control and authority to implement certain processes, you also balance your personal thoughts with how to structure things based on the best plan for the project and the community in the short, medium, and long term. Next, be sure to develop and communicate your outline for the sites, specifically in terms of structuring recruiting and orientation, chronicling successes and challenges, capturing important relationships, planning for the intermediary to be aware of the sites, and a plan for managing members, as well as how you will collect information needed for project reports. There's so many elements here. We also mentioned that a good tip is to identify requirements, such as complying with AmeriCorps and VISTA program rules, including the Memorandum of Agreement between your VISTA project and AmeriCorps, and abiding by the Memorandum of Understanding that you have with your sites, which helps them understand their relationship with the intermediary. Be sure to share your plans and requests for the frequency of check-ins with the site supervisors, who the site supervisor should contact when challenges or concerns arise, and how the supervisor should contact you. That seems like common sense, but passing along contact information is a must. You may even consider drafting a sample email or document to show your site specifically what information you need. Help your sites help you. Your discussion of expectations can be grounded by first discussing with your sites the purpose of your 3-year VISTA project and its goal. Sites must understand the VISTA program overall and how your project fits in it. So be sure to share with your sites why and how they help the project achieve its goals and how the intermediary and the sites share a unified purpose. Emphasize just how important it is that they know the overall project purpose and goal, and that they continue working to align their work with it. Your sites may still have their own organizational mission and priorities, but they need to make sure that their work that the VISTA project is doing is part of your intermediary VISTA project's purpose. Your action step here is crafting and possibly customizing the purpose in ways that your sites can understand it and easily explain it to others. Moving from the purpose of your project, a good topic to transition to is your expectations around methods. Along with sharing your overall approach with your sites on how you're managing the intermediary project, identify approaches and tools that are available for sites to use to manage members and accomplish tasks at the site. An approach may be as simple as creating a report tracking spreadsheet or providing different email templates for your sites to use. Depending on the intermediary project structure, you may choose to have a specific method for all sites or allow sites to choose their own method that is within reason, still making sure it's compliant with the rules and regulations and making sure that it builds momentum towards the project's destination. Your action step here regarding the method is to reflect on what your project's approach should be when you work with your sites to effectively recruit, orient, support, and sustain them. Then, document the approach and solicit feedback on it from project staff as well as site supervisors. We cannot emphasize enough just how critical effective site communication is, and it's clear it's important to you based on the comments in the mural activity. You want to help facilitate a successful project by building bridges and connections with the people of your project. This is a vital way to build and enhance your intermediary project and work together towards accomplishing project goals. You also want to ensure that sites are aware of the duties and the roles of all project stakeholders. This includes the project director, site supervisors, project staff, community members, organization board members, and so on. This really increases the flow of ideas and information, especially when recruiting members in the event of a quick staff turnover or member turnover. Your action step here, specifically relating to people, is to work with individuals on your project to brainstorm and practice even the simplest ways of developing and strengthening relationships, whether prior to or after meetings, or using an online chat platform that allows for open, continuous, and conversation. And then we also want to mention that to strengthen your project, it's critical that your sites understand and adhere to several policies. To clearly communicate expectations around policies, you want to make sure that your sites follow and use certain tools. Your task is to gather and identify practical resources, such as the rules and regulations of AmeriCorps and the VISTA program, as well as your VISTA project, and contact information for your different sites. Describe and explain any internal intermediary policies that exist, and give sites time to ask questions about them. Provide resources and make them available and accessible so that sites can regularly find and use them. Examples of resources include the project purpose, the focus areas, various templates, stakeholder contact lists, information on what to do if they encounter challenges, etc. Your action step around policies is you want to make sure that you clearly articulate what the policies are, where the sites can find more information about them, and where your sites can go for more support. You also should periodically review your policies. You may do it quarterly, monthly, semi-annually, but you want to periodically review them to make sure they're up to date, and then reorient your sites to them to avoid confusion about any sites following wrong or out-of-date policies. As you probably know, one requirement of AmeriCorps is that intermediaries must submit project reports. And we do mention this deliberately because we've heard intermediaries ask questions about the reports and how to best prepare for submitting them with the support of their sites. I'll briefly mention that the reports include, but are not limited to, the Project Progress Report, or PPR, and the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, the VPRS, which are all required for all VISTA projects. There's also the Federal Financial Report, or FFR, which is only required for certain VISTA projects. If you want more details about the reports, you can find them on the VISTA campus in the learning path that's titled VISTA Sponsored Reporting Requirements, or you can contact your portfolio manager. But specifically around reports, it's important that you clearly communicate to your site the expectations that you have for them in providing you the necessary information to compile the reports, and you need to make sure that you tell them when that information should be submitted to you by. So let me give you an example. Some project directors will create a blank copy of the Project Progress Report, the PPR, and they'll share that with their sites so that the sites can fill in all the information and submit it to the intermediary, let's say 5 business days before the report is due. That makes it so much easier and more structured for the intermediary project director to take all the information and easily copy and paste the information into one report since it has all the same fields. And that way the intermediary has it for their records and can also easily enter it into eGrants by the deadline. Collecting details and working to complete the reports may feel time-consuming, but you will likely be better set up for success if you build in a process from the start and communicate with your sites the benefits of contributing to the required reports, such as reports are really important because they help intermediaries understand more about what is occurring within the project and its sites. And reports also serve as documentation that really aids the project director and stakeholders identify gaps, work that still needs to be done, challenges, opportunities for assisting others, and planning for project sustainability. So let's pause for a brief moment to learn about your experience. In the chat, we're going to ask you to answer the question, what else do you require of or expect from your sites? We do ask you to be as specific as possible because it may help other attendees on the webinar. In this, your example may be a specific procedure that you want to put in place, or it could be certain types of information about your project. And if you're brand new to your role and are just now creating a process to build expectations from your sites, you may want to think about what else do you feel that you need to require of or expect from your sites. We'll give you about a minute to respond to this chat question. Again, this is a chat question that we're asking you. What else do you require of or expect from your sites? So take about a minute to do that, and we'll look at the results in a minute. Seeing quite a few responses coming in. I'll read off a couple as we give you a little bit more time to respond. But again, the question is, what else do you require of or expect from your sites? And I'm seeing some really, really good information about an onboarding series of trainings, which sounds fantastic, not just giving them one quick orientation and saying, good luck, but really walking them through several trainings and information. Quarterly site visits is great if you have the ability to do that, either physically, if you have a budget, or you could also perform some form of a virtual site visit to still form that relationship, which is absolutely critical with your sites. I'm seeing attending VISTA-related webinars. That could be sponsor webinars like this one. It could be asking your supervisors to attend member webinars to learn more about what information they're receiving. Expectations for storytelling, which is extremely wonderful, not just giving you data about the progress of the site, but expecting your sites to tell their story, talk about what they're doing, what they're achieving, mid-year reviews. I'm seeing other expectations and requirements about what professional development they have given VISTA members, which I think is key. That way it shows your supervisors have a vested interest in the member's success personally and professionally. Some projects expect routine communication process. Again, making sure you outline what that process is up front so that you can be flexible as necessary. And then I see expectations that sites allow members to attend cohort professional development trainings. So if members come to the site and say they found a professional development opportunity or they want to learn more, the intermediary expects that the site allows that. And then I'll read off just a couple more. Some projects expect sites to give feedback on their work and their relationship with the intermediary, which I think is also part of that whole 360-degree learning we talked about earlier, everyone learning from each other. And then requirements that sites invest in an understanding of the members' goals of being at the site. So that way the site is not only directly connected to the intermediary project and forms that relationship, but it shows that the site really cares about the member and doesn't just want the member to accomplish the goals of the VAD, really wants to help usher the member along in the process of accomplishing the overall project goal and the member's goals. And the last one I see is photos of VISTA member projects. I think that's a great way to encourage. You may want to require it or just encourage it, but photos or stories, basically all capturing ways that you as an intermediary can use that to tell your overall project story. And that helps with great things like recruitment and telling the story of how the VISTA project succeeds in the community. These are absolutely wonderful ideas, and these are great different expectations coming in. And I'll say that the most important thing that I've seen is that you are really seeing information that you can adapt and use at your project, all the stuff any of you can take and use. So thank you for using this chat question and providing your thoughtful contributions about what you expect or acquire from your sites. I am going to quickly say, let's reverse it now and examine expectations that sites may have of you as the intermediary. When you talk with your sites about your expectations, they will likely ask about expectations of their own, such as continuous support, knowing that you are in this work with them and how you will help them along the way. Clear communication, which we've mentioned multiple times, letting them know about requirements, project updates, next steps, and more in a way that they can understand it. Guidance and structure, providing them any policy, recommendations, and formal structure involved in operating a site. Examples and templates, sharing with them any samples and templates that you have that can make their job and your job so much easier, such as a report template to collect information. Opportunities for collaboration, bringing sites together, again, in person or virtually, to connect and network with each other and you, and possibly other experts or staff from other projects to build relationships, share their experiences, and collaborate on their work. Give these some thought so that you're prepared to raise them yourself or discuss them when sites ask. Kim, based on your experience and the work you're doing in your current VISTA project, does this sound familiar to you?
It does, Eric, especially about the idea of a supervisor's expectations, how it affects the overall project's ability to thrive in the short, medium, and long term. It's important to understand that and to relate to that, especially with the program director, understanding that this is about the success of the program, not the individual. Think about the power of an ocean wave, the power it has to erode the rocky coast. Yet even that wave retreats regularly. A program will have ebbs and flows for a variety of reasons: staffing, site changes, recruitment struggles. But by keeping the goal clear, you can always adjust your route. So for example, in ours, our program itself had the expectation that there would be 2 VISTA leaders who would pretty much handle everything regarding the members: recruitment, training, care, whatever. Then we were only able to recruit 1. And so far, we haven't found any for the next term. So we adapt to the current situation and adjust responsibilities and methods. We plan in ways that enable a standard that we can more easily repeat, like instituting a software that allows easier access to communication and data, and for our members to take more leadership responsibilities amongst themselves. My story about recruitment is an example of the truth that every project at some point is going to have challenges. Therefore, it's the best practice to set expectations on how to approach them, but also to be realistic that you will have to be flexible in how you handle them. So in my experience, there's 3 kinds of project challenges: those you inherit, those you make, and those that just happen. So for example, before I started, within my project, there was a site that does life-changing work. The VAD has good steps, but when you read it, you go, I arrived, the member's already in place, doing a lot of direct service. Nobody sees this as an issue. Yet, you don't want to lose the site, but you don't want to get in trouble with AmeriCorps. The basis is the source of the challenge really doesn't matter. What matters is that I deal with it. Otherwise, that challenge becomes a problem. And the difference between a challenge and a problem is that a challenge is something you overcome to reach your goal. A problem is something that you go around, and that change in direction can lead you off your goal. So stay on track, deal with the challenges that arise.
Thank you, Kim. What a great point about needing to set expectations and start planning early. Part of that is knowing just how to adapt when circumstances change and you encounter the unexpected obstacle. Let's reorient ourselves to today's agenda. At this point, we've defined what an intermediary is, we've outlined the 3 components necessary for project development, and we've discussed in detail communication strategies. Next, we're going to check in with you. We'd like to follow along and check in with you about how you followed along with today's conversation, so we'll pose a question via the poll. The question is, which approach below would best support intermediary project directors in setting up sites for success in the first year of their VISTA project? You'll see a poll appear on your screen. We do ask that you take about a minute and respond based on the information that we've given you and what you think. Again, the question is, which approach below would best support intermediary project directors in setting up their sites for success in the first year of their VISTA project? We'll give you about a minute to respond, and then we'll get to your questions. Thank you. So I'm seeing quite a few responses coming in. As a reminder, once you select your answer, don't forget to hit submit. We'll give you another 10 to 12 seconds, as I appreciate all the comments and feedback people are providing. It's great participation. We'd love to see that. So again, another 10 seconds or so as you answer this last poll that you see on the screen. And while we wait, if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and start typing those in the chat. We'll get to those in just a minute. But regarding the poll, it looks like most people have responded, so we will go ahead and close the poll. And I do want to again thank you for your participation. So let's see how you did with this question. Which approach would best support intermediary project directors in setting up their sites for success in the first year of their VISTA project? The correct answer is B. Develop communication structures between their organization and their various VISTA projects. And this is because developing your overall communication approach will better position you to share an organizational chart as proposed in option A, or a training opportunity as proposed in option D. Option C has your site submitting reports directly to AmeriCorps when they actually come from you, the intermediary. So thank you very much for participating. Our discussion today is VISTA specific, but I do highlight this article from Indeed.com as a recommendation for further study, as it talks about managing a team working in different locations, and it has general advice that is still widely applicable to our work. So we do encourage you to review this short resource to hear echoes of what we discussed today, along with some new tips. And you may find that you want to share other relevant resources as well, but you can access the link via the chat. As I mentioned earlier briefly, we talked about VISTA Connect. There's an area called Resource Exchange, but before I get to that, I want to say if you haven't done so yet, dedicate some time to getting professional development, which you can do on the VISTA campus. So in addition to looking at the VISTA training side of the VISTA campus, for materials, recorded webinars, etc., there's a link to VISTA Connect on that part of the VISTA campus where you can learn from your peers. You can ask each other questions, offer tips and recommendations, share resources using the resource exchange, and grow your network. We talk about how important it is for you as the intermediary to develop relationships with your sites. Here you can develop relationships with other intermediary project directors. So take a minute to take a look at that, and we encourage you to be involved and participatory. Before we get to some questions, we'd really love to get your feedback about this specific webinar and how we can improve the presentation. Your input is valuable as we use it to review the content and what you share. So please take a few moments to complete the brief survey. Thank you so much in advance for sharing your honest feedback with us. It's really valuable. So we do have time for a couple of questions. We'll scroll back through the chat to see if any were posted earlier. And again, if you do have any questions for myself or for Kim, our guest speaker, especially about developing and enhancing intermediary projects, please post them in the chat and be as specific as possible. We appreciate your participation and your interest. I do see a question that came in, and Kim, I'll start answering the question, then I'll turn it to you to see if you have any ideas. The question says, we're just starting our VISTA project. Are there any recommendations for trainings or webinars similar to this that would be useful? Specifically ones that give an overall picture of building the VISTA program or the VISTA project. So I'll briefly say from the VISTA training unit perspective, there are definitely resources that would be useful. I think the first is, most of them are on the VISTA campus. If you go on to the VISTA campus, which is just learn.americorps.gov, make sure you create a free account if you don't already have one. But on the left-hand side, you'll see a filter. And for example, you can highlight VISTA sponsors and click OK. That'll show you all the learning paths applicable to VISTA sponsors or project directors. And especially if you're just building your program, definitely take a look at the VISTA sponsor orientation one if you haven't already. That's a little bit more of a higher level, but really important picture about what the requirements are, how to build the program. But there's other recorded webinars and resources in that learning path and ones around it. I can also add specifics later, but there are definitely other resources in addition to what your portfolio manager would give you, specifically to help you get started as a VISTA project in general, but specifically as an intermediary project like we're talking about in today's webinar. Kim, do you have other resources or thoughts you have in mind about someone who's just starting up a VISTA project and trying to learn more about what they're doing?
Yeah, Eric, AmeriCorps has wonderful resources, but don't be afraid to think outside the box. Developing a successful AmeriCorps program is really not that much different from developing a successful nonprofit or a successful business. So look at resources that are outside as well, especially if there's any that relate to the community that you're serving.
And this is actually another great plug for VISTA Connect, because Kim and I have a lot of resources to share with you, but many people on this webinar are either new or maybe they've been doing this work for a while, and they may have additional resources to share. So I would recommend also going to VISTA Campus, navigating to VISTA Connect, posting your question there, and then many other people on this webinar can respond, and many others, about what other resources and trainings, in addition to what we provide, can really help you get off to a successful start. Great question, and we'll get more information out. And there was another question earlier about the mural, and two-part question. One, can people still add to it after the webinar, and will the results be shared later? The answer is yes to both. The mural will be up for the next couple of days, so you can access it and add to it because you may have other thoughts. And yes, sometime over the next couple of days, I will compile the results and add that to an email I send out to all of the attendees so that you can see what people shared, and it can still be a collaborative tool so that you can use that to continually build and enhance your Intermediary VISTA project. So with that, I don't see any other questions. I do thank you very much for all of your participation. I do want to highlight next month, we hope that you can join us for our next webinar on the topic of managing sites, taking place on December 19th, which is a Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'll say that today's webinar was focused on building and enhancing an intermediary project, a little bit more high level, but specifically around communication and orientation of sites. This webinar, Managing Sites, will go into much more specific detail to help individuals and VISTA project directors learn what does it mean to manage sites, especially as an intermediary having different legal entities as part of your VISTA project. What does that mean? So we hope you can join us, and we look forward to seeing you then. So thank you for everything that you do as an AmeriCorps VISTA supervisor and sponsor, and for your participation in today's webinar. I also want to give a huge thank you to our guest speaker, Kim Lengert, for sharing with us today and all the great work she and her VISTA project do. Thank you to our instructional designers, Jess Knight, Vanessa Francis, and Emmeline Clemens, and our producers, Misty Tilley and Tara Roberson. And I also want to thank you for participating. We in AmeriCorps VISTA cannot do what we do without you. So thank you so much for everything. We hope we'll see you again next month on our next webinar. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.